I'm glad to see that you have chosen to extend into the law of sines and the law of cosines. I want to point something out real quick. This is actually Algebra 2 material, so it is advanced from what we do. And I want to thank Mrs. Greiser for using her notes. Here's when we use the law of sines. We do not have a right triangle. So if we don't have a right triangle, that's when we're going to use the law of sines. The law of sines is a proportion that states, okay, I think I spelled that wrong, but I can't figure it out. The law of sines is a proportion that states a divided by sine of a is equal to b divided by sine of b is equal to c divided by sine of c. That means we're referencing these opposite relationships. You'll notice that this is a concept that we came across first when we were doing sine. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's why it's called the law of sines, because we're using an opposite angle from a side. Now, there's three different ways we can do this. We can do a over sine a equals b over sine b. We can do b over sine b equals c over sine c. Can you guess what the third one is? A over sine a equals c over sine c. So we only use two sets of these at a time. We don't use all three. Given two angles and a side, we can find a missing side. Given two sides and an angle, we can find an angle. So you have to be careful to make sure you know what you have so you know what to do. All right, so let's look at a scenario. Let's look at a triangle that's not a right triangle. And let's say I have 30 degrees and I have 100 degrees and then I have 5. So the question is, do I have two angles and a side, or two sides and an angle? This is two angles and a side. Very good. Let's look at another scenario. I'm learning that drawing triangles in funny orientations is very important. Let's say I have 40 degrees, I have 16, and I have 11. Do I have two sides and an angle, or two angles and a side? I have two sides and an angle. Both of these scenarios allow me to find the missing sides and the missing angles. Here's a question. Let's go back to this first problem. How would I find that missing angle right there without using any formulas? Just real easy. I could subtract, correct, because I know every triangle has 180 degrees in it. That's the first thing you're going to do. If I have a triangle, I have 107 and I have 25 degrees. So if I have two of the angles, the first thing I'm going to do is find that missing angle. 180 minus 107 minus 25. You'll notice that we have to move away from using the 90-degree reference because we're no longer in a right triangle. So my missing angle is 48 degrees. We don't want to find all the sides. Let's just find side B. Nope, we already know find side B. Let's find side A. So I have side A, which I need, and I have angle A, rock on. What other side do I have? I have side B, and I have angle B. So what does that 107 do? Well, it helped us find angle 48, but that's it. So if I have A and B, I'm going to use this proportion. We're going to say A, which I don't know, over the sine of 48 is equal to B, which is 15, over the sine of 25. This is just a formula, y'all. Don't get all bent out of shape. A lot of us get anxious when we see something new. It's just straight up set up a proportion and solve. Find the pieces you need, ignore the pieces you don't. All right, so when we look at this, a lot of us are going to want to just jump in and do a proportion. We're going to want to do a times sine 25 and 15 times sine 48. Let's pause for a minute. What are we actually solving for? We're solving for a. So if we need a by itself, how do I get rid of sine 48? Right, just multiply both sides by sine 48. Save yourself some trouble. Now let's see how that would look in our calculator. Again, we want to all be using the same calculator. Make sure you're in degree mode. Make sure it's sine, cosine, and tangent. So we would type in 15 divided by the sine of 25. Now you have to close your parenthesis. And then because this is multiply, I'm going to multiply the sine of 48. So the length of side A, this is a length, it's little a, is 26.376. So little a equals 26.376. That's pretty straightforward, huh? Let's try this second one. I have A, and I don't have B or C, but I have two angles. So I have two angles and a side. That means I can use the law of sines. The first thing we need to do, of course, is, well, let's skip that. Let's just solve for side C. Because if I'm looking at what I'm given, just like when you did your trigonometry, if you just look at what you're given, I'm given, oh, I'm not given enough, am I? Nope, I'm not. I have to find A. Okay. Let's go ahead and find A. See, this is what happens when Miss Meyer gets excited. So A is 35 degrees. Okay, now we can proceed. Here's where I got stuck. You have to have one angle matched with a side that has a value. So here I have an angle that matches with a side. Before I did not. I had angles, but they didn't match with a number on a side, so I didn't have enough information to proceed. But let's go ahead and solve for side C this time. So there's side C, and here's side A. So we would say A over sine 35 is equal to C over sine 115. Again, we don't want to go through the entire proportion process. Let's just multiply both sides by sine 115. Calculator time. I want you to try it first and then turn it back on, see if you got the right answer. So we're going to do sine 115. We have to close the parenthesis, times 30 divided by sine 35. What's the length of side C? The length of side C is 47.403. So C is 47.403. Cool. It's plug and chug. Plug your numbers in, plug it in the calculator, you're good to go. Sometimes your answer comes out as not possible. That's okay. We simply have values that do not create a triangle, and we just need to recheck our measurements. So if you were doing this in real life and you got a does not exist, you need to go back and check your measurements. Let's look at a different scenario where we have a side, and an angle. So this time I'm going to be solving for the angle rather than the side. Let's see, I have A and side A, and I have B. That means I'm solving for angle B. 7 over sine 30. Now, what's going to go on top, the 16 or the sine B? 16 is correct. So we have a little something we have to do here, because not only are we solving for an angle, but we have our variable in the bottom. So here's what we have to do. We'd have to go ahead and do the proportion. So we will have 7 sine b is equal to 16 times sine 30. Now how do I get sine b by itself? Correct, I divide by 7. So now I have sine b equal to 16 sine 30 divided by 7. We don't want to round if we don't want to. Do you remember what to do to get the angle? What do you type in your calculator to get the measure of an angle? Right, we have to inverse sine. So we're going to grab our happy calculator. Now you'll notice my calculator is set up to sine, cosine, tangent. Hit your 3 dots. Make sure you're clear. And we're just going to type this whole thing in. So we're going to do a sine. That says, tell me the angle given the information I have. So 16 sine, so I got to clear this out and go to sine 30, close my parenthesis. Oh, this is not looking good. It says NaN divided by 7. All right, that's interesting. NaN, that must mean that this does not exist. Angle B does not exist. This doesn't work. All right, so what do we do? Well, if this was a real life scenario, we would go back and check all of our measurements. But something obviously is wrong where I was not able to create a triangle that actually works. Let's look at example 7. I want you to look at that. Yeah, check it out. It's the same triangle. What's different? The A value is different. Cool. Okay. So what do we got? We got 10 over sine 30 is 16 over sine B. I'm going to kind of like skip to the end. I know I'm going to have sine B by itself. I know I'm going to have 16 sine 30 on the top because that was the same as the other one. And then I'm going to divide that by 10. That looks better. That looks better. Now let's use Mr. Calculator, or Miss Calculator, gender nonspecific calculator. Clear everything out. Since I'm looking for the angle, the first thing I type in is a sine. 16. Now now I need regular sine 30. You're like, Miss Meyer, it's still telling me it doesn't work. Well, let's see what happens when we divide by 10. Still doesn't exist. That's weird. No, it does work. You just have to hit enter at the end. Let's go through how you would type that in your calculator one more time, okay? So the first thing is I'm looking for an angle. So I'm going to do a sine, right? And it gives me a parenthesis. And I'm going to type in 16. And then I want regular sine. So I change that, regular sine, 30. Close the parenthesis, divided by 10. Close the parenthesis and hit enter. If you don't hit enter, you don't get an answer. Okay, that's better. Nice. So what's the measure of my angle? 53.130 degrees. Neat. All right, so I want you to use your 2 scenarios to do A, B, C, and D. That's all you're going to do, A, B, C, and D. And then I will post the solutions. Remember to call or email me if you have any questions.